Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friends of Family Farmers Small Farm Legislative Summary Session Wrap-Up, Muckboots in the Capitol, also known as What the Heck Happened. My name is Alice Morrison, and I am joined by Brittany Deming, my colleague at FOF, and we are here to tell you what happened with the priority bills that we were working on in Salem this session. So I am going to share a presentation. Put that in slideshow mode. All right. Does everybody see that?
Yep.
So we are here talking about the 2024 Oregon State Legislative Session. Friends of Family Farmers is a nonprofit here in Oregon, a 501c3 nonprofit that was founded in 2005 to be a voice for small and mid-sized, socially and ecologically responsible farmers who are highly diversified and sell into local markets. So that is a long way of saying the type of farmers that we serve are folks who are part of the community food system. We represent about 1,600 farmers across the state, and we have been doing this for almost 20 years. We were founded primarily as an advocacy organization, but since then have grown to have 2 technical assistance programs as well. The Oregon Pasture Network is our community of practice for pasture-based livestock producers around the state. And if you become a member, I accidentally put the membership button on the screen here instead of the regular logo, but if you become a member, you can have the proud member emblem on all of your marketing materials, because we do some marketing on behalf of our Pasture Network members, as well as peer-to-peer learning opportunities, educational courses taught by experts like veterinarians and soil scientists, and we bring our small livestock producers into the conversation about how livestock is produced and processed within the regulatory framework of the state. We also run Oregon FarmLink, which is our land access program. We've run FarmLink, just the platform FarmLink, OregonFarmLink.org, for almost a decade now. And that site is a place where you can list yourself as a land holder or land seeker to try to find the right farm land for your farm business, or find the next steward of your land in a values-based land transfer. We also have a one-on-one technical assistance program through Oregon FarmLink for land seekers. It's called the Navigate program, and we are currently accepting applications for that program if you are seeking land in Oregon. We have a couple of different cohorts going, and we'd love to hear from you. So what we are covering today, we're going to be focusing on 4 bills in this overview today, and then we'll talk briefly about like next steps and what's coming up this summer, so folks are aware of what to look out for from FOF and from our policy work going forward. But if we have any other bills that folks want me to touch on, these are the ones that we most closely monitored and were involved with during the session. So we have the most to say about them, but we can certainly answer questions or say we don't know about other legislative proposals that were out there. But first, we are going to turn to HB 4059, Specialty Seed Protections in the Willamette Valley Protected District. This was our #1 priority in the 2024 legislative session. And this is the bill that had to do with changes made to the way that canola is grown in what we call the Willamette Valley Protected District, which is a box put over a crucial growing region in the Willamette Valley in order to protect ecosystems that allow us to be one of the most prolific brassica specialty seed growing regions in the world. I think most of you who are here today have heard me talk about this issue before, but for those who are viewing the recording, we are one of the only places in the world where it's possible to grow some brassica varieties. Oregon is Western Oregon and the Willamette Valley is part of what's known as the Green Corridor, which includes parts of British Columbia, the Skagit Valley in Washington, and down through the Willamette Valley, where over 90% of the seed stock of some brassica varieties are grown for the entire world. So the seeds grown here preserve biodiversity in our food system, grow millions and millions of pounds of food across the world every year. And this seed growing is one of the most lucrative small acreage farm models that can happen. And that enables farmers who don't have access to very much land to make a living on their farms and sustain their families and feed their communities through their products. So it's a crucial industry that we have here in Oregon, and we are very lucky to still have the conditions necessary to perpetuate the specialty seed industry. And the problem with this situation is that canola is also a brassica. And that means that it has the ability not only to cross-pollinate with our specialty seed crops, but along with cotton, canola and cotton are the only two commodity crops that have the ability or have the genetic makeup that makes it possible for them to crossbreed into native weed populations in the US. And we don't grow cotton here, we only grow canola. So it's the only concern when we're talking about a commodity crop crossbreeding into native weed populations here in Oregon. So that would make it a lot easier for that seed to bank and to become a problem in the future, even when it's not being actively managed in a field, like if someone had planted it intentionally for a growing season. So the reason that we are so concerned about this is because the general brassica regulations, which are present elsewhere in the state, do have restrictions on blackleg and pest control, which are very important issues. Disease and pest control are very important, but they do not talk about cross-contamination. It's only in these protected districts, of which there are 3 in the state. There's one in the Willamette Valley, one in Central Oregon, and one down in Malheur County in southeastern Oregon. And in these protected districts, there is special consideration given to the cross-contamination risk by limiting the amount of canola that can be planted. So this bill, the process that was undertaken here was a work group following the passage of SB 789 in 2023, which we've been having this conversation over and over and over again, and have gotten sunset extension after sunset extension for the last little over a decade, about 12 years. And last year, we sought to make these restrictions permanent to protect the specialty seed industry permanently. And due to the political realities of the session, there was a last-minute amendment to that bill that extended the sunset 1 year to 2024, where we are now, and mandated that ODA convene a work group to present to the House Agriculture Committee. So that work group convened in the summer and fall of 2023, and actually it went all the way into the winter of 2024. The last meeting of that work group was about a week before the legislature started, and maybe it was 2 weeks. I apologize, 2 weeks. But that brought together brassica seed stakeholders and canola stakeholders, as well as representatives from the Board of Agriculture, organizations like the Farm Bureau, as well as scientists from OSU, Dr. Jim Myers, who has a perspective that is more in line with what I'm talking about, the cross-contamination risks, and then Dr. Carol Mallory Smith, who's another scientist from OSU, who does not see any difference between canola and other brassicas. So the scientific community is also split on this issue, and OSU had no official position on the science behind this issue. So through that work group, consensus was reached on some issues. Some issues were very much not brought together. And the House Agriculture Committee, using the ODA work group report, put forth a compromise proposal. We came to the negotiating table in good faith, and tried to work with our legislative partners and those on the other side of this issue, but there were some hard lines that we cannot cross in order to protect the viability of specialty seed industries in the state. And so we did support with gritted teeth one of the compromise proposals, but we're not comfortable or able to concede any further action. And therefore, because compromise could not be reached, and the other side, the canola side, also had some hard lines that they were not willing to cross. And instead of moving forward with one of the compromise proposals, Representative Helm, the chair of the Agriculture Committee in the House, decided to propose a sunset extension of the current rules until January of 2028. And so that passed out of the House committee and passed with a minority report on the floor. The minority report was defeated. It went to the Senate, where there was also quite a contentious hearing, and there was a drafting error discovered during the Senate process, which meant that there needed to be a slight amendment. It didn't change the legislative intent of the sunset extension, but there needed to be a slight amendment because the word genus had been changed to species when talking about canola and identifying which plants were canola in the bill going forward. So there had to be a slight wording change made at the request of Legislative Council, which meant that after it passed the Senate, it did have to go back to the House for a concurrence vote. And that happened on the last day of session. It was one of the last things passed. Very nerve-wracking, but at the same time, we do appreciate the attention to detail in the process. And this bill did end up passing, and the sunset has officially been extended until January of 2028. So outcome on this is that the current rule stands for 3 more growing seasons. So the canola is favorable because it is a winter planting over winter crop. And so like it's planted in the July to September and overwinters in the field. So this represents the 2024, 2025, well, the harvest seasons of 2025, 2026, and 2027. And so there will still be the current rules for those harvest seasons, 500-acre total cap on canola, and canola growers must obtain a permit to get their slice of that 500 acres through ODA, and ODA pins on the WVSSA, the Willamette Valley Specialty Seed Association map on their behalf. So those rules stand for the next 3 seasons, and the next steps that we see for this process is that we are going to have to reconvene with the stakeholders on both sides sooner rather than later, because the canola growers have made it very, very, very clear that they are not going to be waiting until 2028 or 2027 rather, because it would be January of 2028. So we would have to fix this in the 2027 long session, but they are not going to wait that long. They see canola as the only crop that can save a flagging grass seed industry as a rotational crop. I don't believe that that is true. There are other brassicas even that they could be rotating that would be just as profitable for them. But there's a certain group of farmers who have latched on to canola as the only option to save the grass seed industry. And so they will be bringing a proposal sooner rather than later. So we do plan to return to the table with those folks as well as our specialty seed stakeholders. I am hoping that we can take at least a couple weeks to breathe and not talk about this, and then we can come back to the table after people have had a chance to calm down from this session. But I know for a fact that canola growers will not be waiting until the sunset is about to expire to have this conversation. And honestly, it's nice to have the conversation when we don't have to worry about the wall of having the sunset expire, because that is the utmost and most unacceptable outcome. So you're going to hear from us about this quite a bit in the future. And then also the central, I know I mentioned earlier, there are 3 protected districts in the state. The Central Oregon Protected District has also received a request to repeal all canola specific regulations within that district. And just to be clear, that would be any restrictions on canola specifically, not removing blackleg or pest control laws. Everyone agrees that blackleg and pest control regulations for brassicas need to stay in place, and we would never consider, and neither would the opposition, removing those. So just want to make sure everybody's clear on that one. But that there was a meeting last night in Madras, and one of our colleagues who lives on the east side attended to see what was going on there. It seemed like a preliminary meeting to discuss the removal of any canola specific language in those regulations. I want us to keep an eye on that, because although the Willamette Valley Protected District and the Central Oregon Protected District do have vastly different ecosystems and vastly different established industries. We do need to make sure that we're not creating a status quo where just because it's a protected district and things have gone a certain way, one way or another, that we are creating a space where that could be used as precedent to do something in the Willamette Valley Protected District. They are not equal. They are not the same in terms of the established growers, the crops that are grown there. And we do have an obligation to protect seed growers in Central Oregon as well. So we want to make sure that this is a nuanced discussion and that we're including the perspectives that need to be at the table. So that is what I have for you on 4059. We are going to move on to, oh, except it didn't go. 4060, the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program. So this was another bill that FOF supported from the get-go. We also supported this bill or this concept last year. I don't remember the bill number that was in 2023, but the process here was that this program requested funding. This program has been authorized since 2017 and has only been allocated funding once in 2021. Since that time, it is a program that is administered by OWEB, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and has 4 key program areas, which we're going to get to on the next slide. But it's all about conservation and stewardship and conservation easements and helping farmland stay farmland in a conservation-minded and land viability sense. So it was left out of the budget last year because of some negative feedback about conservation easements as a tool perpetuating systemic wealth disparities for legacy landowners. And those arguments, I see a lot of merit in those arguments. This is the way that we look at the conservation easement portion, is that this is one tool in the toolbox that will protect that farmland in perpetuity, no matter who owns it, and has the ability to lower the cost of farmland for the next owner of that farmland. But it does, in its essence, and in the resource transfers that happen during a conservation easement, it puts money in the pocket of the current landholder in order to ease their transition to making this a protected piece of land. So that is a real concern that we and others in the coalition worked on addressing with the concerned legislators, and talked about the other benefits of the program, and that this is one tool. This is not the only thing that we should be doing on land access by any means. And that the conservation management plans portion of this is in a separate entity that has a lot more benefit to more people across the state. So ultimately, the House Ag Committee did introduce HB 4060 with the expressed goal of requesting the funding for this project. They requested $10.8 million. And by the end of the session, the bill itself, 4060, ended up dying in Ways and Means, but the funding request was incorporated into what we call the Christmas tree bill, which is the budget reconciliation bill for the Oregon legislature. And the program was awarded $6 million in funding for the rest of the biennium. So that means that OWEB will continue to administer this program for the remainder of the biennium using this funding. And the 4 areas of the program are conservation management plans, which is essentially the state paying the match for federal conservation programs that require a land steward to put up some of the match in order to access those funds. So a lot of those programs come through NRCS, and that conservation management plan also helps people develop long-term goals for the management of their land and the future of their ecosystems. It does have some funding for conservation easements, which are all like the programs or the projects that they're prioritizing have already been approved through the USDA ASAP ALE program. and we're waiting to find the money for the match for that program as well. There's also a possibility of grants for technical assistance, and that would be grants to organizations, perhaps like FOF or other service providers, to provide the technical assistance in these conservation areas. And then also there's succession planning support in the framework of the program. Yet to be seen how this money will be divided up. But just knowing the costs of some of the projects involved, $6 million is a wonderful investment, and it will be matched with federal funds, but it is not, this is not nearly the end of the road for this project. We will have to talk about these things for quite a few years more. Okay, so now we're going to talk about SB 1537. This is the governor's housing package. So Governor Tina Kotek had made it very, very clear at the beginning of this session that housing and addressing the housing crisis in our state was her number one priority for this session. And yes, there is a housing crisis. There are a lot of people who are not where they need to be. They don't have the resources that they need. And I want to preface this with, FOF is not a housing group, and we only paid attention to one small piece of this because we know that there were many, many, many very good things in this package. There was just one small piece about the redesignation and rezoning of farmland in this bill that we had an issue with. So the process on this bill is, we are a member of the Oregon Conservation Network, which is a policy coalition brought together by the Oregon League of Conservation Voters. We are the first farm or agricultural group that they've ever invited to join. So we're very proud of that. And we are still one of the only groups in that coalition that represents farmers directly. So OCN designated this bill a major threat when the first draft came out. There were the thing that we are most concerned about here is the expansions of urban growth boundaries on a fairly automatic basis with pretty large acreage tags based on the population of the city or town that's requesting the expansion. And there were also some other problematic pro-developer bits that were put in there. And our position at FOF has always been, we want to encourage redevelopment of lands within the urban growth boundaries. We have a wonderful system of land use here in Oregon that has limited sprawl and suburban development and tried to make our cities denser for quality of life, access to services, all of those things that we know denser cities can provide, and to keep farmland close to cities so that people can access those markets and have a better flow of local food in between those outlying rural areas and the urban city centers. So there was a major threat designation put on this bill by the Oregon Conservation Network because of this UGB expansion piece. And then there was an amendment that was introduced to slightly lower the UGB expansions. And because that was what was requested by OCN in order to remove their major threat designation, they did lower that to a bill of concern. And there were also some of those problematic pieces, one of which we're going to talk about in just a moment, that were removed from the bill in order to make it more responsive to the conservation community and the farm community, while also keeping a lot of the things in there that were about redevelopment and the things that we would like to see. And I think that something that's good to remember is that Thousand Friends of Oregon did an audit, and there are over 10,000 redevelopable or first-time developable acres within UGBs currently that are not being used. So it's not like there is no land within UGBs to redevelop into housing. That is, it's just always easier for a developer to develop undeveloped land, could be farmland, could be forest land, all of those things, than redeveloping a formerly industrial site or something like that. And so they tend to favor that expansion rather than redeveloping internal sites. The other thing to note is that all of the UGB expansion numbers in these bills are net housing acres. So any roads, schools, public utility, or other infrastructure that's required for this development based on local codes is in addition to the UGB expansion numbers that we see in this bill. So I think that there's also something to note is that in the expansions, only 30% of the housing built within the expansions has to be, quote, affordable housing. And the rest, I think, is that portion of housing that has to be within 120, like 80 to 120% of the median income has to be accessible to that, which is market rate housing. So there is not going to be a significant amount of truly affordable housing in these expanded acreages. So given all of that, this bill did pass. This was the governor's #1 priority. There were lots of other things in that bill that are very good. Additional funding for shelter beds and to help unhoused folks and to prevent folks losing housing and rent assistance and things like that. There were a lot of things in this bill that are very good. It was just partnered with this UGB expansion piece that we see as pretty problematic, and we will be monitoring the impact of this bill on the communities we serve. And for all of you who are watching today, we would love to, if you have reports of projects that are displacing farmland in your community, we would like to hear about them. And also we will be on the lookout for rulemaking periods associated with any of these changes so that folks can make their concerns known. So I think that land use is going to be one of the things that we are going to be working on for quite a while, because as the housing crisis does not resolve itself overnight, folks will be looking for more and more creative solutions, and we want to make sure those are balanced with protecting the high value agricultural soils that we do have here in Oregon, which are a vital part of our state's identity, economy, and feeding our communities. So we want to make sure all of those things are considered. And the next thing that I wanted to talk about is one of those unfavorable parts of 1537 that was taken out and put into another bill. So this is HB 4026, and this cropped up in the last week of session. It was very, very rushed at the end. And essentially what this bill was to remove the ability of a community to send a UGB expansion by their city or county to a referendum of the voters. And that was, well, UGB expansion or other zoning things. And that was done, in our opinion, and it seems like it is in direct response to the community outcry over the UGB expansion in North Plains in Washington County. There is a very unpopular UGB expansion that is going on in that area. We have a lot of farmers in our network who are very concerned about this. We held a community meeting with them earlier in the session, and they had successfully gathered the signatures to refer that expansion to a referendum on the May ballot. And this law that just passed strips away that power from the citizens, and now we think if the law stands, it will not that ballot measure will not be able to move forward. So this was an unpopular part of 1537 that was holding it back from getting support from a lot of groups. And so it was taken out, and we were happy to see it taken out, but then it came up. It was, I hate this phrase, but when there is a bill that maybe it's just a study bill or it doesn't say a whole lot, what they call it when you put an amendment in to change the entire bill is a gut and stuff. Very gross, sorry. But they put this provision into 4026 to keep it alive. And that passed very quickly right at the end of the session. And we registered testimony in opposition, and we were very, very upset to see this move forward. And what that means is that the North Plains ballot measure is in jeopardy. I know that there are groups of folks, the Friends of North Plains Smart Growth community group. I put their website here. They are working very hard to mount a legal challenge and to make sure that folks can still have their voices heard on this land use issue. But we are directing people to the local coalition to take action because they know best what is happening right now on the ground. And we're happy to provide more info about that in the follow-up to this session as well. So that is a huge bummer. And we were not happy to see that move forward. But it was quite a last minute addition. So oh, this slide looked better when I made it before. Sorry. But moving forward, we don't take any time off from policy. Although it may be the interim now, we still are working away, gathering all of the information that we ask our membership for during the short session years. So we conducted 6 focus groups for regional gatherings. Our staff conducted those focus groups, and we sponsored 6 additional focus groups at culturally specific and BIPOC-led partner organizations to include as many perspectives as possible from as many farming communities as possible on what the main barriers or opportunities for small farms are here in Oregon. And we are also still gathering responses to our survey, our biennial family farm survey. And that, I think Brittany can put it in the chat, but we are gathering responses to that. We extended it. It was going to close on Friday, but we decided to give you all a couple more weeks to get that into us. And this is where we base all of our policy decisions. And that process culminates in the FOF policy report. So we last published one in 2022, leading up to the 2023 long session. And it's time for a new policy report. All of the responses to our survey and the things registered in our focus groups will go into this policy report, which will be launching, we're crossing our fingers, beginning of June, to analyze all the data and put together all of the trends. And that will dictate our priorities for the next 2 years. So I urge you that if there's something that you think FOF should be working on and we're not working on it right now, put it in the survey, because if it doesn't show up in any of our surveys or focus groups, we're not going to do it. We only work on things that our farmers have told us are a problem for them. It's a way that we hold ourselves accountable, but also a way that we involve our folks in the creation process. So once that policy report is released, we will also be doing a series of farm tours with legislators on our top issues, kind of working with our farm partners to find a farm that really exemplifies the problem we're trying to solve and give folks an opportunity to speak directly to legislators when they can see the problem on the ground. So we'll be doing some farm tours this summer. And there will also be some legislative days are when the legislature gathers in Salem during the interim, the not active session time, in order to learn about issues. They do informational hearings, they do panels of experts. And our goal there is to make sure that we are elevating the issues that our farmers have told us are most important and elevating the solutions that we have vetted through our communities for long-term policy solutions. So looking forward to summer ledge days and the FOF policy report and those farm tours. And a bit of timeline here is that the legislative council request deadline for pre-session filed bills is at the end of September. So FOF will likely have our priority bills that we are proposing figured out and submitted for pre-session filing through our legislative champions by the end of September. So if you all have anything that you are working on out there, please do get in contact with myself or Brittany over the summer. And we would love to see how that fits into what we learned from our policy report and the feedback that we've gotten, and see if we can work together. Because if you come to us with a policy proposal after that pre-session filing deadline, we can act in a supporting role, but it is unlikely that we will have the capacity to take on a lead role because we will have already determined our priorities. So just as a process note, please reach out before that September deadline if you'd like to discuss a policy proposal with them. All right, that was a lot of information.
Can you talk about Double Up Food Bucks real quick?
Oh, yes. I'm so sorry. Maybe I blocked it out because it is bad news, but Double Up Food Bucks did not receive an allocation from the state in this 2024 legislative session. So they, in order to get their full match from the federal government, they are seeking private foundation and like community specific match funds. If you want to help with that effort, please get in touch with Rachel Ward at Farmers Market Fund. She is the executive director of Farmers Market Fund and is heading up that gap filling fundraising effort to help meet those goals and make sure that we can maintain the level of that program here in Oregon that everybody loves and is a great asset to our food system. All right. So yes, I wish I had better news on Double Up Food Bucks, but unfortunately, the funding request was not successful this year. Do we have any other, I'm going to stop sharing because there's not a whole lot on that slide anyway, but are there any other questions, or you want to stop the recording?